Have you been performing so long you don't even know who you are anymore? You've held it together, adapted, survived, but somewhere along the way, you lost your sense of self. What if your healing doesn't come from trying harder, but from rekindling that fire that got snuffed out when the world told you to hide? This coaching program is designed to help you stop patching symptoms and start rebuilding identity. You'll reconnect to your voice, your values, and your real inner strength that's always been there. Now, I just want you to ask yourself, what would it feel like to wake up proud of who you are again? Let's find out together. Schedule your discovery call today at youradhdguy.com. Aren't you worth it?
They need to recognize that the emotions of people are important because to a thinking person, emotions can feel kind of superfluous. But
Yeah.
the emotions are very important in decision making. Like logical thinking people tend to look for the very best solution, period. Emotional people look for a very good solution that also fits their values and their moral code. And the combination of the two is where you get to great solutions.
This is Don't Mind Me, I Just Have ADHD. But let's be real. ADHD doesn't just mean forgetfulness or fidgeting. It's meant being labeled, masking, performing just to survive in a system that wasn't designed with us in mind. The podcast isn't about fixing you. It's about unlearning the shame you were handed down. Here we talk about ADHD, trauma, addiction, depression, healing, identity. All the messy things that make us human in our life and work. And we do it with fierce kindness. I'm Ron Sowers, your ADHD guy. And if you've ever felt like you had to earn your worth, if you ever struggled to slow down, speak up, or show up without a mask, welcome. You're not too much. You were never broken. And now you're waking up. Let's remember who we are together. Hey friends, Ron here, and this episode is going to challenge how you think about leadership, communication, and ADHD in the workplace. I sat down with Jeremy Doran, a seasoned engineer, a career developing coach, and podcast host of the Neurodivergent Leadership with Jeremy Doran, who has a fascinating perspective on how neurodivergent minds, especially ADHD brains, show up in fields like engineering and management. We talk about why engineers with ADHD often thrive in technical roles, but struggle when promoted to leadership, and how companies are totally unprepared to support that transition. This isn't just a conversation about work. It's about understanding how people think differently, communicate differently, and solve problems differently. And Jeremy breaks down why that's not a weakness. It's your biggest competitive edge. So whether you're neurodivergent yourself or just trying to lead better and connect deeper, this episode is packed with tools that will shift how you lead, listen, and live. Stay tuned to the end because I have a special gift just for you. Now let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome back. And I'm here with Jeremy Doran. It's Doran, right?
Doran.
Doran. Okay. Yeah, I should have checked first. But Jeremy Doran, Doran. Um, what is like so you're a career developing coach and you do like corporate training. Um, do you have any experience with like ADHD in that realm of corporate coaching or in your life in general?
Yeah. So a lot of the people that I coach are engineers who have
Hmm.
become managers, and within the engineering community, there is tends to be a lot of neurodiversity, um, and so ADHD is pretty common in the people that I deal with, and I think it's pretty common in general, I think.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot more common. Um, I think that, people are getting like, overdiagnosed to a degree of like the severity of it. It's not necessarily an issue that needs medication.
Mhm.
Oftentimes it just needs um, the proper guidance, and with coaching. And how did you get involved in coaching, especially engineers?
Yeah, when I was in corporate America, there was someone who came and did coaching for us. And if you were interested, you could go and sign up for it. And I took that course and I loved it. And
Yeah.
then after I left corporate America, he decided that he could no longer do the coaching. So he asked if I would like to take over for him. And once I started coaching, I'm like, oh, this is where I belonged the whole time. So. And it's kind of coincidence that there have been a lot of engineers. My background's in engineering and psychology, and I just happened to have started working with a lot of engineers who became managers. So it's what I focus on now.
Yeah, that's interesting. Engineering and psychology. You don't usually hear those like two terms together.
No,
Um,
it got me interviews out of college just because people wanted to meet the guy who took both of those things.
yeah, what got you interested in that, like engineering and the psychology path? Like how did those two connect
It's
for you?
growing up, like math and science always made sense for me. So
Yeah.
engineering was a natural fit. People really did not. I was usually could not understand why people said and did the things that they did. And I was lucky enough in high school to take a 3 days class on the Myers-Briggs. And it got me to really start understanding just how differently people view the world and communicate. And it felt like people were being difficult until I realized just how different we all are. And
Yeah.
I just found it so fascinating and so useful that I kept going with psychology.
Yeah, I definitely spent most of my life thinking that why, people thought the same way. And I had trouble with slowing down and I was like, it took me a long time to wrap my mind around the fact that, we all think differently. And once I was able to understand that and really soak that in, like everything started to become a lot easier to manage and handle what other people were doing and not think that, take it personally, like
Mhm.
that person's just being that way around me. And, just when that mindset came into play, it was like, wow, how self-centered that can be that I'm thinking that this guy had just woke up today and thought, yeah, I'm just gonna like mess with Ron's day. I'm gonna do this. I know he doesn't like it because like I've never told him that I don't like it, but somehow he knows. Like how ridiculous that like mindset is, and it's honestly pretty common.
Yeah, and no matter how much you know it, it's very easy to slip back into it. I remember walking down the street one time and I saw a friend of mine. I waved to him and he just completely ignored me. I'm like, oh boy. In my
Yeah,
mind, I'm like, what did I do that got him so mad at me?
yeah,
And the next time I saw him, I'm like, you didn't say hi to me when I saw you on the street the other day. I'm wondering if there's something I did wrong. He's like, oh, no, I never saw you. I was like in my head practicing a presentation, so I never
yeah.
even knew you were there. But I spent days wondering what I did to make him mad.
Yeah, no, and I can totally relate because it's like and the more that I look at myself, the more that I can kind of understand other people and be like, well, some days I just don't show up in a happy, like, I want to talk to you mood. Like I just want to be, I'm feeling depressed or I'm feeling sad and whatever that is. And that happens to other people too. So they show up differently depending on how they feel.
Yeah, it's hard, but I try to constantly remind myself that I'm not the center of the universe.
I know, right? So, the career developing coaching, like what is something that what is your passion that brought you to that? Like, what really stuck with you, like to be able to train like specifically engineers? Is that just like something personal that you're interested in as an engineer or
So everybody struggles when they make the transition from being an individual contributor to being a manager.
yeah,
Because, like for engineers, for example, they've spent somewhere between 10,000 and 30,000 hours getting really good at engineering. And then they're so good at it, they get promoted, and people just think they can change on a dime
yeah.
and develop management skills. And it's not that easy. So it really stinks to see someone who's been a superstar their whole career and then get promoted because of it and all of a sudden really struggle because most companies don't know how to help them make the transition. So that's when they will bring someone like me in.
Yeah, it's interesting that they don't have like management training, like an extensive management training on how to be a better leader, how to, because I know some of the best leaders in personally and, in my research that are very, they show a deeper level of empathy towards other people. And I can imagine being an engineer and being about numbers and this and that and just systems that can be incredibly difficult to have, that emotional awareness of other people, much less yourself. How do you, what are some of the things that you do to help with that?
A lot of it goes to self-understanding. So I like assessments like the Achiever Profile or the Myers-Briggs. And like I said, it helped me get a much better understanding of myself when I went through it. And once you do that, then you start to realize, you may tend to be one way, but it doesn't mean you always are that way. And if you recognize it, like I'm very introverted.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that I can't go out and talk to people. I do it all the time. It just takes a little more effort for me than it does for an extroverted person.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm the same way. I'm introverted and that's one of the things that I coach is like how to be more pro-social. And like you said, just because you're introverted doesn't mean that you don't know how to have conversations or even deep, long conversations. It's just they take a lot more out of the introverted person than it does like anybody else, especially if you're like deeply introverted, which I am.
Well, like I said, the class that I took was really very enlightening,
Yeah.
and and it felt like people were pretending to be social, and I'm like, why would they fake doing that? And then eventually I'm like, oh no, they actually just are
Yeah.
that way. Um, and once you recognize that someone is different than you, then it allows you to make some adjustments. Like again, on the Myers-Briggs, I'm very much of a thinking person versus a feeling person. And it doesn't mean that I don't feel or that I can't appreciate other people's feelings.
Mm.
It's not where I start from. So I need to consciously make a decision. Feelings are important. And, especially in a heated situation, until you address the emotion, logic's never going to be heard. So you need to just
Yeah.
recognize, if you recognize where you are, then it allows you to work on flexing to the other type.
So how do you teach, them to be more emotional, like aware of the emotions and I guess expressing the emotions?
Yeah. So having those softer conversations is something that, you know, they need to recognize that the emotions of people are important because to a thinking person, they can feel emotions can feel kind of superfluous. Um, but
Yeah.
the emotions are very important in decision making. Like logical thinking people tend to look for the very best solution, period. Emotional people look for a very good solution that also fits their values and their moral code.
Hmm.
And the combination of the two is where you get to great solutions. If you just get the technically best one, it's not always what's really going to support the direction that you want to be going in. And if you only are thinking about your values, you may miss getting the best possible solution. Working together is where you get to the optimal.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like on paper to that individual, that may be the best solution, but you're you're not considering like the emotional aspect. And a lot of companies don't do that, especially when they're investigating problem solving issues like I've seen. And it's like the idea is that if you once you walk through that door of whatever company that you're working at, everything that you had outside is left at that door. And it's so incredibly insane to think that like every individual can just, there's certain individuals that are better at that, but it's incredibly taxing emotionally, and it puts a lot of stress on somebody to just like have to ignore that for 8 hours and then come back to it, especially if it's like something that's, may not be as like intense for somebody, but it is so they don't understand the distinction. So it's that communication, that like that optimization that you're talking about between, okay, let's work with the emotions and the technical side of it.
And when you're managing, sometimes someone won't be performing the way you want them to. And very often there's a reason for that that's somehow based on emotion. Something's going on or something scares them or whatever it is. And if you don't ask questions of, what's going on that's making you not be able to do this one task. And if you ask, then and really ask
Hmm.
and follow up with more questions, you'll get to the root of the matter and then you can come up with a solution together. But if you just ignore the emotions that may be contributing to the problem, you're never going to get a resolution.
Yeah, exactly. You got to do some digging, because I'm sure that, when you work with engineers, it's a lot of men. And men have, t have notoriously not been able to speak about their emotions. And it's not because they don't want to or they don't have them. It's just they've never had a system that's designed around that being okay to do that, because the perception is, well, I don't want to be perceived as weak. So if I talk about being depressed or being sad, like, yeah, then I don't know how to deal with that. I don't want to be seen that way. So that's like I can't, they shut down. How do you get through um that that type of barrier?
So can I tell you a quick story?
Yeah,
First,
of course. I
just
love stories.
yesterday, I was talking to a friend of mine who's a surgeon, and she said that in their training, they are told over and over again that if a man comes in, even if he says that he has a small problem, you have to pay very close attention because he does not want to go. Men do not want to go to the doctor. They don't want to get the help. And if they actually took the step to go in, they have to
Yeah.
really, really pay attention because there's probably something pretty significant, even if they don't want to admit that it's significant.
Yeah, that's huge. Like, yeah, yeah, no, definitely. And I can relate because my dad's always been like that. He's always been like not wanting to take, aspirin for a headache unless it's so bad. And, that's kind of trickled into my view on medication. And most recently, he actually like cracked a tooth and didn't even want to and put off, didn't think that going to the dentist was a good idea in that situation. Like, I can't imagine the kind of pain. Um, so that's just like, and he's an engineer as well.
Oh
So
yeah.
like I get, like he's got a lot of engineer humor. I don't remember. There was like one joke about like, oh, he's an engineer, and like, oh, there was like, oh my God, like his life is over. Like,
Sometimes when I'm networking, people ask, what do I do? I say, I help engineers talk to humans. And they always get it. They always laugh. And they almost always tell me a story about some engineer that they deal with at work or at home or wherever it is. It's funny that everyone's got a story.
yeah, it's always like it's so almost caricature, like how it's like, and unfortunately it does show up that way. I guess what do you attest that to? Like, why are so many engineers so have this difficulty, connecting on an emotional level?
Yeah, it's certainly not all of them, but it is the
Yeah,
tendency. And everyone's brain is different, and people who are very interested in solving technical problems, just their brain tends not to, also focus on the emotional side of things. So it takes a pretty specific personality type to be a good engineer. And that kind of focus on like
yeah,
this one thing makes it harder to expand out to the rest.
yeah. So do you get like a lot of people with ADHD or autism that you coach?
It's rarely like autism's rarely diagnosed, and it's called the spectrum for a reason. I joke with some of my friends who are therapists, and I will say I might be on the edge of the spectrum, and they'll always laugh and say, "No, you're not." And then they stop and think about it for a minute. They're like, Maybe, like you're right
Yeah.
around the edge of it." So it's all degrees. So yeah, a lot of people either diagnosed or not diagnosed are, you know, on the spectrum or right around it in the engineering world.
Yeah, no, and when you start to look at things on a spectrum, like it starts to just be like, oh, okay, if it looks like they're doing something that's not normal or a little bit off off the ranch, you know, um, it's more like I'm like, okay, well, and most people don't know how to open up about like their emotions, much less like a diagnosis like ADHD or autism. What helps you to kind of get them to open up about that?
It's one of the engineers that I've talked to had a great explanation when he became a manager. He knew that he wasn't going to be good at the emotional side of it. So he basically engineered a solution to be more emotional as a manager. So if you look at it as a problem, then it's a problem that can be solved. So if you recognize that you have ADHD or whatever it is, and you say, okay, I have this and it causes me some difficulty, and it's not all bad. Like
Yeah,
ADHD can help people be very great at certain things. It just makes some other things more of a challenge. So
yeah,
if you look at the challenge as a problem to be resolved, you don't always have to solve it yourself. Sometimes solving a problem means getting help, whether it is, medicine or just some techniques or strategies or whatever it is. But, you know, no one just started engineering on their own without somebody else helping them and teaching them how to do it. And it's the
yeah,
same with dealing with, being ADHD.
yeah, definitely. And yeah, it's something that I've learned is like knowing your limitations. Like knowing what you can and can't do has been something that's given me a lot of strength. Like I'm not going to go pursue. I don't. You don't have to be good at everything. You can just focus on these things and get help with the rest. So I'm sure like once they get to that point of becoming a manager, they're like an all-star engineer. Um, it's probably difficult for them to see themselves as somebody that needs help. How do you kind of get to that point if they're struggling with that?
You know, Fortune 500 CEOs, more than half of them have a coach. So if, the guy who's running Coca-Cola knows that he needs a coach, then
Yeah.
how can a new manager not think that they could benefit from having a coach? And sometimes, they know more about their job than I do. I'm just an outside perspective, and having an outside perspective along with, some experience that they haven't got just goes such a long way to helping people. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Because like you look at Tom Brady, and I always bring that up. It's like he's got during his playing days, he had like eight, nine, 10 coaches. Like he's one of the best players in the world, and that's probably a significant reason why, because he's willing to listen to all these people. He's willing to let them happen, and like coaching really isn't like something magical. It's more about somebody knows a little bit more than you, or maybe a lot more than you about something that you want to get better with. The thing that really is missing in that situation is like you can't motivate yourself the way somebody else is getting paid to motivate you. And the doubts, especially as having ADHD are something that is like you don't want to handle on your own. Like you want to have somebody in your corner that believes in you, that supports you, that sees the best in you and is trying to cultivate that.
And just knowing that you're not alone. Like
Yeah.
people, so many people are not diagnosed with ADHD until they're like 30, 40, 50. And they've just thought that it was something that they were the only one for a long, long time. They're like, why am I different than everybody else? And then come to realize, oh, there's a lot of people with whatever the issue is that you're dealing with, and just getting their perspective. If they've been in it longer, then it's worth talking to them.
Yeah, even if it's just a little bit, so like what about the men that are like or people that come to you that are like they're they for me like I didn't get diagnosed till about like 2 or 3 years ago. I didn't think that I had ADHD, or I thought I grew out of it. And when I did find out, it like made a lot of sense, but it also felt like I was broken. So do you run into that in your coaching, um, like with guys that have just figured out that they have ADHD?
You know, uh, so I have not been diagnosed with ADHD, but I believe that I have some. And it just occurred to me recently because of all the techniques that I use to help
Yeah,
myself focus. Like on my computer, when it goes to sleep, the message on there is complete this task, you must. It's a picture of Yoda saying it in the way Yoda talks about
yeah,
completing tasks. And I realized how many things I do and have always done to help myself stay focused on tasks because I tend not to. And it just finally occurred to me, I'm
that's
like,
cool.
oh, I've been doing all of these like coping mechanisms for a reason because I've got, you know, a thing. So I think most people, when they finally recognize how many coping techniques they're using, they will finally realize, oh, there's a reason why I need to be using these, and maybe there's more help I can get rather than just what I've tried so far.
Yeah, and even developing those coping mechanisms are like it shows like that you have a huge level of creativity. Um, and intelligence, like, and that's a huge strength to be able to do that. But like you said, oftentimes there's a better solution, and if you're spending all this energy trying to mask the fact that you have a deficiency here, or you're not as good as at this, or masking the ADHD, like often, like that's energy that you've taken away from the focus on your job. So you're not going to be able to show up in the best way. So being able to ask for that help and admit that, hey, this isn't something that's a mark against me saying that I have ADHD. It's just more of like, okay, this is how my brain works, and let's try to figure out how to make it work better, or how I can work better within that system with the brain that I have, because it's not going anywhere.
Yeah. And we need brains like yours, mine. Like
Yeah,
all the great inventions were probably made by someone with ADHD. Like
I know.
everything that changed history was somebody who was very ADHD almost always.
Yeah, I know. And it's unfortunate, that those people, and I get why they don't, but like you have this platform, to talk about how you have ADHD, and look at me, I was successful. So you break that myth that if you have ADHD, then you're broken or you're never going to be successful. Like you're obviously showing that you're successful, and that can give so many people that are living with ADHD that hope that, like, hey, if Michael Jordan did it, like I can do it too, in a different area. Like it's not something that's going to hold you back.
Yeah, and you know, people talk about DEI, and some people love the idea of it, some people hate the idea of it. And what I will say is that everybody should embrace diversity, equity, inclusion. And
Yeah.
I don't say everyone should embrace it because that's what's fair. Take the fairness out of it. Your company is going to run so much better if you get a very diverse group of people. And that is, both culturally and the way people's brains work. If you have everyone who is kind of similar, you're only going to get so far. So you have to embrace people who are very different than you. And sometimes companies will struggle hiring and really engaging somebody who's got maybe ADHD because they seem different than the manager
Yeah.
is. And once they recognize the strengths and the power of people who think differently than you, then you can really harness all the ability within your organization.
Yeah, that's a huge, huge point that you brought up, and that's something that I've done a lot of research on, and I want to advocate for in the workplace as well, is like, this idea of like conformity, and how it's such a fragile, weak system to have, versus when you have a bunch of different people that can think in a different way and their strengths are showing up in the best way possible. Like that is you have an edge on your competition because people love innovation, and the only
Mhm.
way to have a real innovation is to have that diverse level of thinking that is brought to about by people that have neurodivergencies. How do you um what are some techniques that you use to get um the corporations to really embrace that on a deeper level?
It's interesting. A lot of it has to come back to studies. Um,
Yeah.
and I'll talk to managers about the importance of your employees feeling seen and heard. And if someone is not a touchy-feely person, they're like, "Pfft, yeah, I guess that's nice, but it's not important." I'm like, no, no. When employees feel seen and heard, like they're
Yes.
25% more productive, the companies make more money, and study after study shows that it's not a nice thing, it's a financially sound thing to do to make people feel seen and heard. So any sort of embracing of people who are different than you or think differently than you, a lot of times I have to fall back on study and show studies that show why it's more effective and more productive and more profitable.
Yeah, you got to speak their language. Like it's like it's like the feel good emotional stuff, it's like it's good on paper and yeah, I'd love to have that just as like a tax write-off, but it goes deeper than that. It's more about, those numbers. Like do you want more numbers? You look at these companies that embrace that and it's always goes back to that inclusion, that feeling like you belong, feeling like you're seen and heard, and um, it's an incredible tool to have, because it's like it does so much, and it doesn't take that much to like really make that change. I feel like that's where the hang up is like, oh, I got to learn a new thing, I got to talk to people, I got to ask them how they feel. It feels icky, and it's like it's something people would rather avoid. But honestly, when you start to understand how, like, you'd want to know how your wife felt, you would want to know how the people in your life felt, and I would hope. And when you do that, it's like you create a deeper connection, even if what they're talking about is being depressed, or they feel sad because like their love life's not where they would want it to be, or they're exploring, you know, deeper about who they are emotionally. Those things go a long way, and they're really not that difficult. It's just over time asking the right questions.
Yeah, and asking questions and follow-up questions and actually caring about the answer. I've coached someone who was a manager, and she had complained about someone on her team who had a ton of potential but just wasn't being all that productive. She ended up having conversations with her and found out that she just wasn't motivated because she
Yeah.
didn't love her job. She wanted to be a professional golfer. And so the person I was working with decided to say, hey, what do you need in order to achieve your goal of being a professional golfer and, a certain amount of time off and pay raise and so they decided to work together. They're like, I know you'll only be here for 2 years, but here's what I'm willing to do for you to help you get to your goal. But here's what I need from you in the way. And she said, for those 2 years, that person was hands down my best employee because I found out what was holding her back and we came up to a solution together. But if you don't stop and ask those questions, you'll never find out.
Yeah, that's powerful. Like what drives you? What drives your employees? What are their passion, and like if you notice that their work is slacking off, like asking them like it's usually a lack of motivation. And, how can you do that in a little way? And oftentimes it's just having those conversations.
Mhm.
People, no matter where they're at, want to have, want people to see them for what they are. And like, it's made such a huge impact in my life, and just the small things that I've done at my own job, that are huge. What is like I know you just told me that story, but what is like the most impactful story that you've had as a coach?
There was, so this doesn't have to do with ADHD, but someone that I was working with, he his boss told him that he needed to work with me. And we sat down. He said, I don't have time for this. I'm like, I know, but that's what we're going to start with time management. And he had not had a weekend off in about 6 months, like maybe one weekend day off, but he'd never taken both weekend days off over 6 months. And he was working about 70 hours a week. And within 3 weeks, I'm like, just work with me on this for 3 weeks. I promise it'll be worth it. On the fourth week, he took his first full weekend off in 6 months. And he came in, he's like, you have just changed my life.
Wow.
That was very powerful.
No, I know that burnout from, and that idea of like I need to keep working. It's usually coming from a place of like distraction. Like you want to be distracted from something going on in your life, or you're running away from an issue, but when you start to like do the work to actually face it, it's really not as bad as you've been running away from your whole life. And a lot of times it's like, why didn't I do this before?
Yeah. It's
That's
like
huge.
cataract surgery. Everyone I know who's ever had it, it's like, why didn't I do this years ago? But they always put it off. So addressing our issues is something that we all tend to put off. And once we do address them, like, oh, finally.
I know. I know. Well, it's definitely been good, and I enjoyed having you on the show. Um, how can people find you?
The easiest way to find me is probably on LinkedIn. So Jeremy Doran Speaks is my webpage, and also that's my name on LinkedIn. So that's an easy way to reach out and get me.
Awesome. Any imparting, what would be the most impactful thing as a coach that, people could leave with?
So for communication, just stop assuming. Stop assuming that other people think and communicate the way you do. Stop assuming that you understood what they said if you're not really sure. So just stop assuming and start asking questions.
Yeah, like for clarity, like
Yeah,
maybe even asking like, hey, I've heard this, but, am I getting that right?
it
It's okay.
it stops conflicts often. If you just stop and say, "Here's what I think just happened." Is that what you understood? They're like, no, not at all. Like, oh, good. Then we're fine.
Awesome. Well, like again, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. I really appreciate and am an honored that you've joined us on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been great. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
All right. You take care.
You too.
And that's a wrap on today's conversation with Jeremy Doran, someone who truly embodies what it means to lead with insight, intention, and inclusion. If you've ever felt like your brain or your leadership style didn't quite fit the mold, I hope this episode gave you permission to see that maybe the mold is the problem, not you. Whether you've navigated ADHD, managing people, or just trying to better understand yourself, remember awareness is a superpower. And when you understand how you think, you lead differently, you connect differently, and you live differently. And if you want more of Jeremy's wisdom, make sure to check out his podcast, Neuroconversant Leadership with Jeremy Doran, where I recently had the honor of being a guest. It's packed with powerful conversations about how to lead, grow, and communicate across neurodiverse teams. And listen, before you go, I need to tell you this. If you've been drifting, feeling stuck in the same patterns, saying you'll figure it out later, you already know how that story ends. Nothing changes. The days blur and the self doubt just builds up. But it doesn't have to. That's exactly why I created my self discovery journal. So you don't have to keep guessing what's wrong or carrying all this alone. It's gentle, but honestly, it's transformative. These prompts reveal things most people never slow down enough to see. And every page is built to help you finally understand the parts of yourself you keep ignoring. If any part of you has been whispering, I need to get my life back together, this is your sign. Don't put it off again. Don't let another week slip by in confusion or on autopilot. Grab the journal now before you talk yourself out of the clarity you've been craving. It's at youradhdguy.com. That's youradhdguy.com. And until next time, stay curious, stay kind to your brain, and remember, you're not here to fit in. You're here to break the mold. And as always, subscribe and may the source be with you.